thanks to the sponsors, DNN Corp, 2SI CITMXS, Managed, ICAT, VendorLink, ITX, Iowa Computer Gurus, and DevPCI. Obviously, without those guys, we wouldn't be here having such a great time in the rain. For those of you who were not at the earlier presentation, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm President and CEO of Carter Solutions Incorporated. We're a company out of Orlando, Florida. We've been in business for quite a while, but mainly over the last 8 years. So we do a lot of IT, software solutions, web application, mobile development, basically focused with Xamarin Studio and Xamarin for Visual Studio for our mobile development. I'm a systems and software engineer for the last 20 years, still a systems engineer, still a software engineer, hands-on. And I've been developing software and systems for public and private companies, Walt Disney World, Earthlink, internet service provider over in the US. And I am very passionate about technologies. I really like to solve clients' problems. I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to technologies. I feel that not every tool can be used, the same tool can't be used to solve every problem. So I spend a lot of time looking at different technologies, trying to really understand what's going to be the best use case for this particular technology to solve a client's problem. So with that, we'll jump into the JWT. So what is JWT? JSON Web Tokens. So how many of you here are familiar with JSON Web Tokens in any shape, form, or fashion? Okay, we got a few. Okay, good. So as you know, DNN with DNN 8 released the JSON Web Tokens, which kind of added another layer of access to the DNN platform through the Web API. So JSON Web Tokens is essentially an open standard authentication protocol. And what that means is that it's just, it's like if you look at TCP/IP, right, where you've got SMTP, you've got HTTP, so it's really a wrapper around the protocol that handles the data that gets moved back and forth. It's compact, so everything is pretty much handled within the JSON package itself. It's self-contained. That means that everything that you need once you authenticate is contained within this package. Okay, so once the package is created, this JSON Web Token goes to a specific server. That server looks and unwraps the package and says, oh, okay, you are so-and-so, you can do X, Y, C, A, B, C. The main difference with this is that if you're familiar with typical ASP.NET, Web API development, and .NET Nuke, you'll realize that it's really like a roles-based authentication. So you get users, they have roles, and then within those roles, once they authenticate, then that's how you define what resources the users actually have access to. Well, with the JWT, it's a claims-based authentication. So effectively what that means is instead of looking at it as users in roles and then resources assigned to roles, you're looking at the actual user himself, and it's a more granular way of actually assigning permissions to a specific user. So now you're not constrained within the context of a role where you've got to create many different roles for different users. So effectively you can actually assign a role to a user through the claims. And then it's signed. So it's got a hash, it's got a signature, you can sign it. It doesn't necessarily have to be signed, but you can sign it, and that just makes it a little bit more secure. So what is the token process? So what happens here, and I don't have a little pointer, but I'll walk over here. So what happens is that you have a browser or a client, which would be a mobile app. That browser client logs in to your authentication server, okay? And again, if you guys have any questions in the process, please raise your hand, let me know. I mean, this is an open forum. I'd rather address it while we're actually looking at it together so that way we can kind of grab a little context around the question. To me, that works better. So you have a browser client. It logs into the authentication server. So if you notice right here, there's 3 swim lanes in this diagram. There's a browser client, there's an authentication server, and then there's a resource server, okay? And that's a key thing to remember when you're thinking about JSON Web Tokens especially in the context of .NET Nuke. So once the browser client logs in to the authentication server, then a JSON Web Token is actually passed back. So the user's authenticated on the authentication server, his little package is put together as a JSON Web Token package, and that package is sent back to the client. The client holds on to this particular token for every single request that it makes to an API. It passes it in the bearer header of the request. And you'll see that in a second when I get to actually doing some stuff, but I want you to understand at a high level exactly how this stuff works. Now, once that happens, the JWT is passed back to the resource server to access resources. At that point, it unwraps it and says, okay, great, you can do X. You can get Y. That's how that works. You guys got it? Okay, cool. No, go ahead.
Very, very similar to what Webflow does, right? It's basically you have an authentication token that sits as a cookie that's being sent along every time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So DNN 8's role in that process that you guys just saw, the swim lanes, well, DNN 8 actually acts as the authentication server and the resource server. So there's no separation of church and state here. I mean, literally, they're both together, and you can't separate it out inside of the DNN 8 service JWT framework. So in DNN 8, how do we enable JSON Web Tokens in our DNN 8 instance? Well, what we do is we go to the host settings, and then we add the security provider to the, like you would a module or like you would, any of the other parts. And then what you do is you have to go to the update. You have to go update the web config, because once you enable this provider, it adds some stuff to the web config that you have to go and configure. So if you're familiar, obviously, I'm sure most of you here are familiar with the host settings, and you have the available extensions, and then you have your providers, and then down here, what you see now in DNN 8 is you see the DNN 8 JWT auth handler. Effectively, what this does is add a handler to DNN so that when messages come in, it just falls in the pipeline, and it says, oh, okay, got it, and it does its stuff. Then in the web config, we've got this new message handler that's actually created. Some of the things to kind of take note of is that when this thing is first installed, you're going to get default include is false. You're going to get force SSL is true. So what that means is that it's going to require you to use SSL when communicating through the JWT message handler. And you want to turn that off when you're developing. Obviously, when you go to production, you want to make sure that it's the other way. You want to make sure that it's secure. Cool. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a demo. I don't think, unless you guys really feel it's necessary, to go into DNN and to point out the providers and to point out the web config. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure we can skip that part. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into Visual Studio, and then we're going to see how this stuff all fits together. So what I've done what I've done is I took the SPA module. Oh, thank you. Nope. Hold on. Yeah, I agree, but I'm trying to get back to it. As you can tell, I am not the PowerPoint guru here. Let's see. Got it. Okay. So what I've done is there is a single page app Uh,
Yeah, you're gonna have to zoom in on that.
oh, wow.
Yeah, good.
Awesome. I don't know how that's going to work on this other side, but this will hopefully work out well. So what I did was I took the DNN single page app project template and just really created a SPA module. Are you guys familiar with that module? It does the whole Angular thing, and it creates, and what it does is it creates the item controller, sets up the database, and just typical stuff. When you run it, I mean, it literally just gives you a module that allows you to just create items. And so that's what I've done. So you can add an item, add item 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. When you look at the code for the SPA module, what you'll see is it uses the services framework in order to send in the right headers to the controller so that it can actually get the active module context. And with that context, you can see, you know, everything that's pertinent to that particular module. So, in order for a external resource or a mobile app, let's just say, to communicate to the services framework under this condition, we obviously have to comment out the supported modules because that is no longer being passed in the headers. So it doesn't know that that's the module. And then with the access level, I just commented out. So I really commented out some of the services framework specific client side attributes so that the mobile app can talk to the web service. And then what I did in here was I knew what the module ID was, so I just hard-coded it because you're going to need that when you actually go to the repository that's already created by the SPA module. It's going to need to know the module ID in order to be able to go to the database to pull back those items. So let's just hit this real quick. Cool. We're going to come down here, and I'm just going to enable this breakpoint. I'm just going to hit refresh on this page because there's a couple things I want you guys to see. And so now we're actually inside as it normally would be with the SPA module. The one thing that you do have is that you actually have access to the active module because the SPA is actually sending across the headers to the calls to the API that allows it to, you know, what would I say, inflate the active module object, right? So it can populate the active module object because it's passing in the headers. So this is what's going to happen. So now I've got my items. It's sending the items back. I'm in the API. This is just standard SPA module stuff. So now if I go to my mobile app, oh, you know what? This may not work because DNN-dev.me is not resolving on the Mac. It's coming up with some weird router user interface. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Oh, yeah. Excellent. Okay. So now I've got this. So now this is actually the mobile app that's talking to the web API. And what you'll notice is that the active module is null, right? Because it didn't pass in the headers with the request to the API, but it is going to come back with my items. So the point is that you can still use the DNN stuff inside of your API. There's just certain things that you have to be aware that are not going to happen when you call into the API using the JWT. And so if we follow the process, so if I go back to the mobile app, now I've got my items, right? So these are my items, same items that are in the SPA module. If I come back over to the SPA module and I decide I want to edit item 1, I want to call it 1B, save. I think we get the point over here, so I'm going to disable this. So we've got item 1B, come back to our mobile app. We do a pull down on it, item 1B. So, I mean, that's really end to end. That's really the basics, the foundation of what you need to develop a mobile app that's talking to your web service using JWT. The mobile app can talk to anything using JWT. So now let's go down a little further and let's examine the JWT in .NET Nuke. So to do that, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to open Postman. And I don't know, are you guys familiar with Postman? It's a Chrome app. It is the most phenomenal tool for working with web services that I found today. I mean, there's absolutely nothing that you can't do. On the left-hand side, you can actually save your requests as collections that allow you to go back and repeat the same request. Oh, yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Let's see. 100% lens.
Oh, he meant like the whole screen resolution, but that's gonna.
Yeah.
But just zoom using the magnifier.
I mean, is that better for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Let's see if I can get this to show up on the left-hand side.
Doesn't it follow the magnifier? The pointer, doesn't it follow the pointer if you move it to the side of the screen? Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Let me collapse this guy a little bit more. Okay. So now we have a request. So when you install the JWT provider inside of DNN, what it does is it does like every other API. It actually creates this JWT auth API. And so whatever your website is, www.mywebsite.com, desktop modules, JWT, API mobile. How many are you familiar with the web API in DNN? Okay, some, not all. So this is standard DNN web API. If you want to create a web API, yours is going to look very similar to this. This one is API mobile login. And so what I've done is in the header, I've got my content type, application JSON, and then in the body, what I'm doing is I'm just passing in a JSON that's host and password. That's actually the name of the user is host, and the password is password. You know, really hard to remember. And I'm using raw as my format. And so when I come here, I hit the send button, and I get back a JSON web token. Here where it says access token, this is your token. Renewal token is used when your JSON web token expires. You use the renewal token, you call into the API renew token, and it gives you a new JSON web token. If you want to see what's in this token, you copy it, you open up your browser. Jeez. Go to jwt.io, debugger, paste that guy in there. and now you see what is the contents of the JSON Web Token. So you've got the hashing algorithm, HS256, which is pretty much standard. You've got the payload data, which is the SID. That's actually the user ID in DNN. If you were to look at the ID at the authentication level inside of DNN. And then you've got the roles that this person is actually assigned: administrator, registered users and subscribers. The issuer ISS is the DNNDev.me. You've got the ticks for the expiration, and then the NBF is when it was actually created. And so that's what a JSON Web Token payload looks like. So now if I go back, so now that we've got this token, we can start making our requests. So if we want to make a call to get items, this is the SPA module that was created by the project. We've got item. You've got your headers, content type, accept, and authorization. This is where you send your token in the bearer. We come up, we hit send, and this is what we get back. Item 1B, and then, obviously we can do other things like create item, we can get an item, a specific item, we can update an item. One of the things you can do here is you can do a test get. Send, status okay, hello host. You are authenticated through JWT. Once your JWT expires, I believe that this is a bug within DNN 8 because you should not have to authenticate to get a renewal token. So once your JWT expires, you'll get a 404 not authorized. Come back in your response, and then you're supposed to go to renew token and just simply pass in the body here, which is your R token, and then and it's just supposed to give you a new token. But for some reason, I couldn't get it to work without passing in the bearer, which doesn't make sense. So Joe's going to take a look at it. Joe Brinkman, he's going to take a look at it and find out. So once I hit send, now I've got a whole new token again. So now I can go back and continue my requests. So just to follow the process, you log in, you get your token, then all of a sudden you use that token for all subsequent requests. It's just that simple. And then inside of the API itself, you've got the ability to get all of the items that you normally would within. Let's see, let's do this. Within the services framework. So now you have everything that you would normally have. So you've got portal settings, right? So you've got access to DNN effectively inside your web API. So what that allows you to do is go to the database, get your data out, send it back as JSON, send things in, create items. And that's how you tie it together. So on the mobile side of things, or if you guys are interested in looking at that process again, how the mobile is actually initiating communication with the API through the JSON Web Tokens. Let's take a look at that real quick. So in here, we're going to pass in the username and password. We're going to create our model, which is just a model that's going to be serialized as JSON with the username and password. We're converting that to a JSON string. And then if you notice, this is the same thing that was in the Postman. It's the same API. Log in. And all I'm doing here is I created this API helper to kind of help with the requests from the mobile app. And it's up on GitHub. I did send it up to GitHub earlier. So if you go to GitHub/Carter Solutions, you actually have access to all this. So you got all the code. So you got the SPA module, you've got the mobile, the Visual Studio mobile app. You've got that, and then the biggest thing you're going to get out here is this API helper, because you're going to be sending encoded data over and over and over and over again, right? So here we just go, we do our handler, we put in our request headers, which is our application JSON, we got our cache control, and then we just post the data to the API. And then what comes back is going to be our JSON Web Token. Once we get our token, we store it globally so that we can reuse it for each subsequent request to the API. And then on the items, when the items gets called, right here, get items async. So it's a repository pattern. We're going to execute it. And then the execute async, we're going to pass in our authorization in the header, the bearer, and we pass in our token. It's just that simple. That's it. I would go back to, let me go back. So go back to my PowerPoint.
The renewal thing?
Yes.
The token there, do you have a code for that? Do you handle that in your code today?
No. It's simple enough. Once you do a request, right, you're actually looking for a 404. Once that 404 comes back, you're basically saying you're not authorized anymore. And then with that 404, you're like, okay, I have the renewal token, which you want to store the renewal token inside of your app, inside of your mobile app, inside of your SPA, whatever client or browser that's communicating, right? Whatever client-side technology you're using. So you want to store that, and then when it doesn't, then you call in the other API call to renew the token. You get it back, you save the token again, and then you keep going through that process.
Do you need to have, the second time, then, do you need to have a new renewal token, or is that the first one that you did when you logged in? That one you use all the time, or?
No. When you use the renewal token to get a new token, you get a new renewal token also.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So as an example of that, let's just go back here. So an example of that is if I do get items, let's see if this one's expired or not. I'm still running. I got a breakpoint. Okay. So if I come over here, I hit send, I'm still at a 200. So I get a 401 not authorized, right? So my authorization has been denied. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go get a renewal token. Let's see if it's here. Oh, this one's unauthorized. Header, bearer. Well, let's just log in, start from there. Okay. So here's the renewal token. This is the access token. Let's just say I take this, and again, this should not have to be this way, but I haven't found another way around it. And then the body is going to be this guy. Okay, so you see this one's a ZR1 ending in a CJ. Bless you. And then if I hit send, what I get back is, well, it's still ended in CJ, but it should be a different token. It's different. It looks, is it different? Work with me here.
Try hitting send again.
I was just trying to see if I could just set it right next to it, but it's not letting me do that. If I hit send again, it'll probably fail because yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So that proves it.
Yeah. Well, I think because the actual token that it generated is different. The bearer token. Yeah, that one's different. So I would have to go back and do it. But it's supposed to be a different, to answer your question, it's supposed to be a different renewal token. So that's supposed to get created every time that token gets created, because the renewal token is based on the original token. So every time that expires, you get a renewal token, you store that as well.
Interestingly enough, it does mean that if you get somehow a failed conversation there, the user will have to log in again. We'll need to go and because your bearer token will have changed and your renewal token will have changed. If you somehow had a failed communication, then you don't have either of those.
Yeah. If you didn't store the bearer token and you didn't store the renewal token, you're going to have to log in all over again. And then you store it. But ideally, you're supposed to have the bearer token and the renewal token. You save those. When you get the 401 not authorized come back, then you want to send in, hey, you want to call it the renewal token API, and you want to pass in the bearer in the header, and you want to pass in the renewal token. So once they get that fixed, you shouldn't even need the bearer token. You should just be able to use the renewal token to make a call, just like you would when you log in. When you log in, you just pass in the data, and then it gives you back, it validates it and gives you back a token. So it should work the same way. You should just pass in the token, and you should get back a new authentication, a bearer token. And if you get back a 401 on that call, and you know that was valid, then you know that the original token's done. You're done. Yeah, you log in again. So, cool. All right, so to finish up, love it. Swap. Okay. So I think we've answered the questions, right? I think we can skip that part. I think these presentations are going to be available at some point, right? So again, the presentation code is going to be on GitHub, So if you go to Carter Solutions, github.com/Carter Solutions, the JWT.io is really cool because you can actually look at the tokens and actually see what's in it. So when you're building, and one of the things that I'm going to see what they come back with at DNN Corp is how we can add claims to those tokens. Because from what I see so far, you cannot add your own claims to those tokens. All you can do is just log in and then get back a token with the roles that it comes with. But I'm going to try to see. One of the things that's available is this Dropbox.com, this JWT mobile integration, which is it's a SPA that actually stores the token information. It actually stores it inside of the browser using JavaScript. And then there's also the DNN platform samples mobile. So there's some resources for you to kind of start playing around with it. Other than that, I want to thank you guys very much for showing up. This is my information. I have business cards here if you guys want to swap, because it's not like I can go see you next week because I'll be in the States. So, and I invite all of you guys to look me up on LinkedIn and stay in touch. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out. Yes.
Another topic, but is it possible to authenticate with the phone number on the mobile app if we know the phone number of the user?
Not unless in DNN that is the user ID. If that's your user ID in DNN, then you can use the phone number.
But you would have to, on the DNN side, you have to do something, right? Because you're not aware of that on the DNN side.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it can be, you could create an authentication provider based on JWT, which does that.
Right, and that you can do. You can create your own custom provider inside of DNN and then use that provider for authentication. So it's DNN, right? So anything that you can do in DNN, it will integrate with it, but you've just got to go integrate with it. That's all. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? Oh, got it. So he's saying that you think that you'll need a secret to kind of hash the phone number or something.
Yeah, or like if you have a reliable way of retrieving phone number, obviously if it's something that's a free text field, it's not going to work. But like you said,
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys very much.